It is just after 1 p.m. on a February day in 2007 when emergency responders arrive at a charming townhouse on Rue de Moulin in the Belgian city of Nivelles, about 18 miles south of Brussels. Just minutes earlier, a desperate emergency call had been made from this house. On the other end of the line was a woman. Her voice was weak, but her words were all the more haunting. She said, quote, "I tried to kill myself, but I can't do it. I want to die." The responders find the woman, still alive but weak, sitting in her kitchen, leaning against a wall with her legs stretched out in front of her. She had tried to slit her own throat with a kitchen knife. Her name is Genevieve Lhermitte, and even though her wounds were deep, her life was never seriously in danger, and the paramedics were able to stabilize her quite quickly. But something about the scene doesn't feel right. Yes, she had lost a lot of blood, but there was blood everywhere, and far too much for it to come from just one person. My name is Holly, and I welcome you to a new episode of my podcast, The True Crime Cocktail Hour. We are now in the middle of our main topic, deadly women. So sit back and relax, and let's get started with Case 3, Mommy Dearest, the silent rampage of Genevieve Lhermitte. Just minutes later, police officers are in the house. Their eyes are shifting between a framed photograph that is in a living room, showing a family of 7, and the staircase leading up to the second floor, with several smeared trails of blood that mark the steps. And as they climb up the stairs, they find themselves standing in front of 4 closed doors. Now they start with the first room on the left, the parents' bedroom. When they open this door, they find the lifeless bodies of 2 children lying in the bed. On the right side is 3-year-old Mehdi wrapped in a yellow blanket. His throat has been slit. And right next to him is his 7-year-old sister, Nina, killed the same way. Both children look like they are merely asleep. Someone had even placed a stuffed bunny in Nina's arms. And then they move on to the second room on the left. And in the second room of the left, they find 2 more bodies. That of 9-year-old Miriam and that of 12-year-old Nora. Their throats had also been slit, and stuffed animals were also placed in the arms of the children as well. Especially Nora showed clear signs of resistance, and the blood pattern suggests that she was not killed in this room, but killed somewhere else, and then dragged over to this room after the fact. In the last room on the left, they find the dead body of the eldest child, 15-year-old Jasmine. She suffered multiple stab wounds and her throat had also been slit. And just like Nora, her body displayed a lot of defensive wounds. And forensic experts would later determine that Jasmine very likely grabbed the blade with her hands in a desperate attempt to defend herself. In the fourth room, they don't find a body for a change. But what they do find is complete chaos. Furniture is overturned. There is blood still dripping from the walls. The desk chair is soaked as well, as if someone had been sitting there, unaware, while somebody else crept up from behind them with a knife. The case, however, is quickly solved. Genevieve Lhermitte, 42 years old, a school teacher by profession, brutally murdered her 5 children and laid them out carefully. How do we know that? Well, she confessed immediately. Now her husband, he was away on a vacation trip, but he was scheduled to come back home this very evening. But what could possibly drive a mother to kill all her children? Well, to begin to answer this question, we have to go back a few years. So Genevieve Lhermitte was born in 1966 in Brussels as the eldest of 3 daughters into a middle-class family. Now, we don't know that much about her childhood and her upbringing, but it apparently was, by all accounts, shaped by education and social stability. But as long as Genevieve can remember, even when she was just a little girl, she was fighting a lot of severe inner turmoils. Her parents, for example, noticed very early on that she has a very strong need for control and harmony. They also noticed that she was kind of prone to depression. And Genevieve would even later say that she always felt kind of inadequate and invisible, and that she was constantly plagued by a lot of self-doubt and fear of failure. But despite her mental health issues, Genevieve managed to finish university with a degree in history and French and a fiancé. So during her studies, she fell in love with this charming Moroccan student called Bouchaib Moukadem, who studied math and physics at the same university. But unlike Genevieve, he never finished his degree. So the two of them got married in 1990, and Genevieve moved to her new husband's apartment. Now this all sounds promising, right? Yeah, you'd think. So here comes the velvet glove with the good old horseshoe. So this is a little bit complicated, so try to stay with me, okay? So Bouchaib Moukadem was the only one of his family to emigrate to Belgium in his early adult years. Now the rest of his family stayed behind in Marrakech, Morocco. And ever since the 1980s, his parents were really good friends with this other married couple called the Chars. Now the son of this married couple, he was a few years older than Bouchaib, and he had also emigrated to Belgium to go to medical school there, but years in advance. So by the time Bouchaib decided to also move to Belgium, Dr. Char, the son of this family, had already built a life in Belgium and was practicing as a general physician. So Bouchaib, he arrives in Belgium, and Dr. Char took him under his wing. Now what started as a mere acquaintance quickly turned into this father-son relationship of biblical measure. Bouchaib really looked up to this Dr. Char guy and maybe even idolized him a little bit. So long story short, when Genevieve moved in with her new husband, she also moved in with this Dr. Char guy. And since Bouchaib had no degree, no stable job, and absolutely no motivation to change any of that, Dr. Char supported the family financially. And all of it, allegedly, out of pure generosity and friendship. Now at first, Genevieve didn't really mind, as she thought that this whole setup was only temporary. But it was not. So in 1992, Genevieve gave birth to her first daughter, Jasmine, and then 3 years later, Nora would follow. Now, after the birth of her second child, Genevieve suffered from this severe postpartum depression, and she actually had to give up her career as a school teacher. Now, her husband, Bouchaib, to say the least, had in the meantime found a goddamn job at a supermarket. Before starting part-time at Dr. Char's medical practice in 1996, before fully transitioning to full-time in 1998. And over the next 5 years, Genevieve gave birth to 3 more children. Now this is actually the perfect time to find a goddamn place of your own. But instead, Dr. Char bought a house in Nivelles, not only for himself, but for him and this entire family of 7. Mind you, with Bouchaib's consent and knowledge, but without asking Genevieve about it. So the family lived on the 1st and 2nd floor, and Dr. Char lived on the 3rd floor, where he also had his medical practice. Now, even though, still then, and we're almost talking like a decade, Dr. Char was still covering most of the family's expenses. And I'm talking everything, okay? Car repairs, insurances, vacations, school trips, allowances, you name it. And mind you, Bouchaib is working full-time at his medical practice. Now, I couldn't figure out for the life of me what he did with all of his money. What I can tell you is that he was working full-time theoretically. The fact is that Bouchaib was away quite a lot. Not just for days, weeks, sometimes even a whole month, visiting his family in Marrakesh. So he repeatedly left her alone for weeks on end with the 5 children. Now, it is said that Bouchaib was never really able to form this emotional bond with his children and his family. And since Bouchaib and his wife Genevieve never really had time for themselves anymore because there was always someone around, the intimacy between the two of them eroded quite quickly. Now, it is said that it was not like he didn't care. It is said that he was just completely overwhelmed with having 5 children. Nowhere near as much as his already mentally fragile wife. But that was something that Bouchaib never really spent a lot of time thinking about. And whenever Genevieve asked him for help or mentioned any kind of struggle with the dynamics with this Dr. Shore guy and this whole living situation, the response was always the same. Just wait till I come back. But nothing ever changed. And Genevieve realized, with growing despair, that her husband wasn't really a partner she could lean on, but somebody who ran away, running from his responsibilities out of fear and weakness. And the person who stepped into that void, Dr. Shore. With Bouchaib's continued absence, and without Genevieve's consent, Dr. Shore took on the father figure role. He paid for everything after all, so I guess he kind of felt entitled to take charge of the upbringing of the children. The thing is, he was authoritarian, he was devoutly religious, he was very cultural, values that he was now trying to impose on her children, and that obviously was a big clash between him and Genevieve's way of upbringing and worldview that was very Western. Dr. Shore dictated the children's schools, their hobbies, their daily routines, the friends they could have, even their own religion. And this is how Genevieve's psychological down spiral began. Now, I'm not trying to find excuses for what she did because there are no excuses for what she did. I just want to try to explain to you so maybe you can get an idea of why she did what she did. First of all, Genevieve was absolutely powerless against Dr. Shore because her husband had financially trapped her in this dynamic. She had no real income, no way out, and no support from her husband, who refused to step the fuck up. And so Genevieve became emotionally and financially dependent. She felt isolated, undermined, micromanaged. She felt like a guest without a voice in her own home. So one time she wrote this letter to her sister, and in this letter she described Dr. Shore once as, quote unquote, a rotten bastard who stole the intimacy between her husband, and their children. She constantly feels watched, and she constantly feels judged by this doctor. And all of that while she's already having severe mental problems and deep-seated self-doubt. And Genevieve realized that this situation was starting to break her. So surprisingly, to you maybe, she made a very healthy decision. She asked for help. So she approached Dr. Shore and told him that she desperately needed psychological help. And to her surprise, he agreed. He was like, yeah, you really should go see someone. He even offered to drive her up to a psychiatrist's office, which he did. But get this. When Genevieve was sitting in front of the psychiatrist and told him that she felt so unwell that she wanted to be hospitalized, Dr. Shore suddenly interrupted her out of nowhere and started speaking on her behalf. And so he told the psychiatrist that, in his professional opinion, Genevieve was overwhelmed, yes, but that she did not pose a threat or a danger to herself or to others. And this is why he thought that there was no reason for an inpatient treatment. And this psychiatrist ended up believing him more than the patient, Genevieve. And so Genevieve's request for hospitalization was declined. And that was the final straw. Even now, in her most vulnerable moment, when she was literally begging for help, Dr. Shore took her last shred of agency. And so in 2007, her mental state had deteriorated to a point where she saw only one way out. So it is February the 28th, 2007, and it's the day her husband is supposed to return home from his trip to Marrakesh. Now this is a side note, but there are a lot of sources, but they all say kind of different things regarding the sequence of the killings. So I just took the one that I read the most, but none of it is like 100% certain and proved, just so you know. So Genevieve had come up with a plan, and she had shoplifted 2 kitchen knives from a supermarket a couple of days before the murders. We don't know why, because she actually had her own damn kitchen knives. So this day actually just began like any other. So Genevieve dropped off her daughter Jasmine at a doctor's office because she had a dermatology appointment. And after that, she picked up the rest of the kids from school and from kindergarten. She drove them home and she made lunch. So while the children were sitting in the living room watching TV, Genevieve quietly took the 2 kitchen knives and went upstairs. So she started with her youngest kid, 3-year-old Miri, and she called for him to come upstairs, saying that she had a surprise for him. So when the kid entered the parents' bedroom, she attacked him, and she actually first tried to strangle him, but she failed. And so she ultimately took one of the kitchen knives and slit his throat. And what is especially disturbing with this one, she killed her 3-year-old son while speaking all of these comforting words and repeatedly apologizing to the child while he was dying. She did the same thing with 9-year-old Miriam and 7-year-old Nina. But when she came to 12-year-old Nora, Genevieve hesitated. You see, Nora and especially Jasmine were older, therefore stronger, and there was a good chance they might fight back, might even be able to overpower her. So she had to come up with a different plan. So Genevieve went to the office and called Nora upstairs. Again, she told her this story of her having a surprise for the child. So she asked Nora to sit on the desk chair with her eyes blindfolded. And when Nora was seated, Genevieve grabbed the kitchen knife and attacked her daughter from behind and slit her throat. Now get this, Genevieve briefly considered leaving Nora's body in Dr. Shore's bathroom as a final act of revenge because she knew that Nora was his favorite. But last second she decided against it and instead dragged Nora across the entire hallway to the room where Miriam was already lying in the bed. So soon after, her oldest daughter, Jasmine, came home. And again, Genevieve told her the same stories she told everybody else. There's a surprise, and I need you to sit on the dining room chair with your eyes blindfolded, yada, yada, yada. But when Jasmine felt the first stab, she jumped up, ripped off the blindfold, and turned around. And the last thing she saw was her own mother lunging at her with a kitchen knife in her hand. Now Jasmine tried to defend herself. She grabbed the blade, but she had already lost too much blood and was eventually overpowered by Genevieve. Genevieve dragged her body to the 3rd room on the left on the 2nd floor, and thus her plan was nearly completed. And now it was time to turn the knife on herself. So she sat down on the kitchen floor and she stabbed herself in the neck in an attempt to slit her own throat. So she was just sitting there, leaning against the wall, waiting for death. but death didn't come. And eventually, Genevieve started panicking, and she ended up calling emergency services. So Genevieve had pleaded guilty, so the trial wasn't really about who done it, but just how, why? Several forensic psychiatrists testified in court that she was not of sound mind when she committed the crime. According to them, Genevieve, at the time of the murders, was suffering from a severe psychological crisis, which is why they initially recommended diminished responsibility, but not full insanity. So that meant Genevieve could still be held accountable for the crimes. And the court agreed, and she was ultimately given the maximum prison sentence. I think it was 30 years. Now, to my surprise, they declined letting her serve her sentence in a psychiatric institution. Instead, she was taken to a normal prison facility. But in 2019, with her worsening mental health, she was finally transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where, in 2023, she submitted a request for assisted suicide. Now, I have to mention at this point that Belgium is kind of like the global leader when it comes to euthanasia access. Thousands of people actually make use of assisted suicide in Belgium every year, and the numbers are ever since increasing. Now, normally this is reserved for people with terminal physical illnesses such as cancer or MS, but sometimes these assisted suicide requests are also approved for people with ongoing and really severe mental health problems. And that was also the case with Genevieve Lhermitte. Now get this, Genevieve Lhermitte died by assisted suicide in 2023 on the 28th of February, exactly 16 years to the day after the murders. So that was case 3 of our main topic, deadly woman, Genevieve Lhermitte. Very disturbing, very heartbreaking case, but also, in my opinion, a deeply compelling one that I really wanted to talk about. So in 2 weeks, I hope we will see each other again for the 4th case and last case of this main topic. And for this one, we'll be heading to Italy. And we'll be talking about a man who got rid of an enemy and thus unleashed hell on earth. Until then, have a lovely weekend ahead of you. Try to relax a little bit and kiss, mwah, hugs, and I see you then.